Okay, so first off, so we're going darker with her hair, and so we're putting in this, it's a number 2, it's not actually a level 2, but we're putting in number 2. So we are going to be adding in lowlights similar to this color. So what I find is the most helpful is just going through your swatch book and figuring out what matches this the best. And then kind of mixing up according to that. You don't want to just go off of your brain, you want to match the wefts as closely as you can. So let me show you what I found. Okay, so I'm using Redken Shades EQ, and honestly, the 5 and 8 looks really close, but I think since we are going just a little darker, I am going to pair it with a little bit of the 4 and CH, just to give it a little bit more of that richness. So I'm going to mix those up equal parts. I am going to use the gel processing solution just to make it a little bit thicker, but we don't need a ton, but honestly, these are going to pair really well, so that way we don't have to worry about if her dark matches the dark of the extensions we're putting in. So I did just take her extensions out. Once I take the extensions out before I color, I do like to go in and trim, because sometimes I put the extensions back in when the hair is wet, or sometimes I forget to trim it afterwards. So I like to make sure that the hair is always getting a haircut whenever we are moving up the extensions, so that way when she takes her hair out of, and she stops wearing the extensions, she is not going to feel like her ends are so thin and sparse. I am going in with my low light. I am mixing up the Redken Shades 5N and 4NCH. This color matches her root color, and also it matches the darkest wefts that we are going to put in. We overall want to feel very Bronde, but we are just feeling a little too solid right now. So I wanted to go in and add in some more depth. Since I will be placing those darker wefts mainly on the bottom row, I do want to incorporate more depth through the underneath and gradually have less depth as I move to the top, because that is what the extensions are going to mimic. Whenever I am low lighting, I like to hand pick each individual section that I am choosing to low light. I feel like this makes things look a little bit more organic, because naturally on our head we don't have such perfect highlights and lowlights. You're also probably wondering why I didn't start with the roots and go in and smudge things. But although from the video it looks like her roots aren't super blended, they actually are in real life, because when we blonded her last time, we did go in and smudge everything really well. So her smudge really didn't need to be touched up. I will be going in and doing some tip outs as well, but I didn't really need to smudge her roots at all. I really like to work in kind of a bricklay pattern when I'm doing low lights. I find that it's easier to kind of mimic what the sun would naturally do. On the very middle sections of the back, I do like to do my weaves a little either thicker or just a little closer together, because naturally there's more brightness as it gets closer around her face and there's more depth in the back. So that just kind of helps mimic what the sun would naturally do. And you can use whatever type of color you like best for this. The reason I like Redken Shades EQ is because I feel like it's very easy to lift through once I'm needing to move up dimension or take something lighter and brighter. It's not really hard to work through. It is more of an opaque color, so it does, I don't know, I feel like offers not a super crazy solid full coverage look, which I personally like. It looks a little bit softer and it is a little bit more forgiving. If you are needing gray coverage, or if somebody's hair really struggles to hold on to color, I would probably opt for using like Goldwell or Kenra. They're demi-permanent colors. I feel like they work very well and they offer a more solid finish. Also, the reason why I'm not choosing the braided technique for my lowlights is because right now my lighter pieces start higher up. So if I am pulling all of my lowlight sections to the side, or even vice versa, I won't be able to fully get where all of the light pieces are sitting for my lowlights without accidentally running into, I don't know, giving color where I don't want it. So if her light pieces started even a couple inches lower, I would have opted for the braiding technique with this, especially since we are mainly just tipping out the ends just to get them a little bit brighter. I'm not necessarily wanting my light pieces to be super up high. So now I have mixed up Schwarzkopf Blonde Me with a little bit of Wella Free Lights and 7 volume, and I'm just going in and doing a little bit of foliage, mainly focusing right on those ends. We've been working on getting her more blonde, but the nice thing with extensions is all of the hair doesn't have to be a perfect match. As long as the ends are as bright as the extensions are, then you don't really have to worry about things not matching. So that's why I'm only kind of picking and choosing, since all of her ends aren't like, they're not just dark or just super blonde. I do like to leave a little bit of our current color out, just to make sure that we have a lot of different varieties of color in there. That is what is going to look the most seamless and the most natural. Now I'm going to go through the fronts and do the same type of thing. I do want to low light a little bit more towards the back and a little bit less towards her front. The very front, like the very front pieces of her money piece, I am going to be leaving those out just because I want those to remain super bright. When I am low lighting the front, I do like to do this on a little bit of a diagonal angle. I do feel that that makes everything lay just a little bit softer when it's, processed and dried and all that. I am using the same formula and just kind of doing the same type of thing. I am doing less foils through my front sections and just something a little bit finer, because we want to definitely see dimension, but we don't want anything to feel chunky, stripy, or any of those yucky combinations. If you're doing a ratio that's a lot more dark than light, perhaps you could kind of do this but in reverse and go in and do some of the light pieces first and then do more of an all over color through the rest of them. So if you're putting in a lot more depth, probably don't do a million foils because you'll be sitting here for the rest of your life, and just kind of work on doing the light foils. For all of my, foils that I'm doing, I am using my color track foils, and the brush I'm using is by Fermar. My comb that I'm using to foil is a pre-sectioning comb. I always like the one that just has the bristles very close together and does more of a micro weave. I find that gives me the really soft blended look that I'm looking for. If you want more pops of the dark, then you could opt for something a little thicker or more of a chunkier weave, but that is totally up to you. Then once I've finished all the lowlights on that one side, I will go in and do my tip outs. I'm going in with that same liner. I do find that it's easier to do this with a paddle. I feel like I can get much more of a precise angle with it, and my saturation is a lot better. Once I have all of my tip outs finished, I am going to go in and color the remaining extensions. We are going to be rooting the extensions that she already had, which you can see that are just laying over by my mirror. I am going in and rooting everything just to make sure that it's going to match perfectly. So I kind of sped up the tip out process just because it gets a little repetitive, but I did the same thing just throughout. Okay, so now I'm going to go through and I'm going to color the extensions. I have laid out saran wrap on here. I find that coloring over saran wrap is a lot easier than like coloring over foils or a towel or anything like that. So with these wefts, we are just going in and we are going to be rooting them just because her roots are naturally darker, and so we don't want anything to poke through funny. These wefts, the reason they weren't rooted before is because they were on the interior of the row. Now they'll be more towards like the outside of the row, so then they'll show a little bit more. So we want to make sure these are rooted, so that way there's nothing funky in there. So I'm using my same bowl. I just have a little bit left in here, but I'm switching my formula up just a smidgen. Because I'm coloring the extensions, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of like warmth in there. So I'm going to be doing 5N and 4NCH. And just a tiny bit of 4WG. Since we are basically filling the extensions, you want to make sure that you have plenty of warmth in there because they really grab onto every like ounce of color in your formula. And since these aren't, you know, super warm to begin with, if I had any type of ash in my formula, that's going to grab really easily. Okay, so what I use to color the extensions, so I like to use a comb that has, you know, smaller bristles and ones that are a little bit more spread apart, and then I like to use a squirt bottle too. So once I have my color all mixed up, I have this laid out flat. It's already brushed through, so there's no tangles, and the top of it's off. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start about an inch from the top of the weft, and I'm just going to go upwards. I find that this is easier than kind of painting downwards because I know exactly where I'm getting my product. So, and then I go sideways just to make sure it's all saturated. Then I like to flip this bad boy over, put that right where it was, and then do the same on the other side just to make sure that it's fully saturated. Then I like to go in with my squirt bottle and I like to spray like almost right up until my line of demarcation that I have. This is just going to act as like a little bit of a barrier, so that way it blurs down really nice. Then I'm taking a clean brush and just going right where that line of demarcation is and just gently blurring that into the water. And then brushing this off on a towel, flipping this over, and then kind of blurring down right here. And then go and resaturate areas that kind of you can tell that they need a little bit more. And just kind of repeat this process, blurring things down. Okay, and then once it's all fully saturated, I like to fold this just so it's a little smaller. Take my comb first and just comb through my ends to make sure there's no tangles, and then I like to comb this all the way through. Comb it first with the big more spread apart bristles, and then going in with the shorter ones, brushing on this side, kind of flipping it and brushing on this side. Okay, and then once this is how this is, I like to just place it in my sink while it processes. I am just going through and doing this on all of the rest of the wefts. I sped up this process quite a bit because I feel like showing something in real time and then kind of speeding it up for the rest. You guys kind of get the gist and you can kind of see me do it. So I did total, I want to say about 7 or 8 wefts. And I did the same thing through all of them. I did the same formula through all of them. And in between, I always just like to make my surface clean and rinse off my fingers. That way I'm not transferring color where I don't want to put it. If perhaps the wefts that you're using already have a little bit of a root, but they aren't quite as dark as you'd want them to be, you may have to adjust your formula a little bit. But normally, if it doesn't have a root and it's bright blonde, you want to make sure you have plenty of warmth in there just to kind of fill things so that way it doesn't take too ashy or it doesn't look too muddy or hollow. If it already has a little bit of a root built in, you don't need to go for as warm of a formula. So just remember that extensions are a whole different ball game, so you need to fill them anytime that you are adding in any depth, because if you don't, it's gonna look real bad. And then for her gloss, I am going to be mixing up 9P of Red Shades EQ and 9AG and 8NA. She lifted super good, but we want to make sure that we're kind of matching what the extensions are doing, and the extensions are pretty cool. I personally really like to use Red Shades EQ. I do find that it gives me honestly the best finish out of any of the brands that I've tried. Since it is a demi-permanent color, we are going to experience a little bit of fading, but I like to make sure that my client's color lasts as long as possible, so I always let it process for the full 20 minutes just to ensure that they are going to have just as long as they possibly can, and to make sure that we can have enough of that warmth fully neutralized. And also with her hair, we did not need to go in and root smudge things, so I'm just kind of doing a global gloss from where I have my lighter pieces. If you needed to go in and smudge, make sure that you smudge before this point. If you wanted to kind of tip out the ends, not when you were doing the low light foils, you could apply the root color and then kind of tip out the ends at the very end, perhaps if you needed a little bit more minimal lift. Also know that based on the level of the formula that we're using, this isn't going to do anything to her dark other than add shine and kind of seal her cuticles. So this is safe to put all throughout. It doesn't have to be just on the lighter pieces, but it'll just add lots of immense shine. That is one thing I really love about Shades EQ, and it honestly makes the hair feel amazing. So if you haven't tried Redken Shades, you really should, because it's a game changer for all things toning and especially for extensions. And with the extensions, I'm just rinsing them out. I do like to rinse and condition, and we aren't toning them just because the tone of the rest of the hair was honestly perfect. So I didn't need to go in and tone them after I rinsed the root out. Then I always like to blow dry. I have this little thing that hangs up on my mirror. It is from the brand Meraki, and it just has little suction cups that stick to the mirror. Then we do have 2 rows of extensions. I totally forgot to film the other row, but this is me sewing in the top row. As you can see, the root blends super well. For some reason, my video here does look a little grainy. I don't quite know why, but I'm just going in and sewing this in. If you are interested in learning extensions, I do have a one-on-one extension course that I go over all of the methods that I do, how to color extensions, all that fun stuff. If you were interested in taking that class, you can reach out to me on Instagram and get more details. But this is just kind of the express version of this. I don't feel like it's fair to show the entire process here on YouTube because that's not quite fair to my students that I have, because why put it on YouTube if they're going to pay for it? So after we finished, I curled her with a 1-inch curling iron, and this is how it turned out. I'm honestly obsessed with it. It's the perfect balance of light and dark, cool and warm toned. So if you guys have any questions or you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it, but I will see you guys in the next video.